just to ensure everyone's up to speed, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm sure you've had to answer thousands and thousands of times over the last few decades, which is just to break down what polyvagal theory is for
Sure.
folks.
The quick way of telling that story, which is what I often say the story I least like to tell, because it can go on and on. It's like 30 years of work or more. But if we think about one important point, and that is our physiological state. Our physiological state influences how we react to the world. So in more scientific terms, we would call it a mediating variable. It mediates how we react to external stimuli, gives us categories of response, or in psychometric statistics, it's an intervening variable. And the issue is when we learn about behavior, whether it's through an educational model or conditioning learning models, we think of it as a deterministic model. We give people information, they process, they give a response. We tend to be less aware or cognizant if there's anything in between. We talk about, oh, the bright person will take the information and process it. So intelligence is that mediating variable. And what we have forgotten is the personal experience. If our body is in a state of fight, flight, or in a state of defense, we don't process information on a learning curve very well. So we have to acknowledge that the physiological state that we're in determines in part how we react to the world, how we learn, how we interact with each other, and how we create cooperation, how we create community, and how we socialize with others. Now, what polyvagal theory does, it tells you more. It tells you what those different physiological states are, and that those physiological states are basically a mirror of the evolutionary history of the neural regulation of our visceral organs or autonomic nervous system. And where the newest ones are really this kind of a social system, and where social behavior, facial expressivity, vocalization are linked to calming mechanisms of our heart and our viscera. So when we are happy, when we are functionally feeling safe, where safety is not operationally defined by not having threat cues, but by a bodily state, we become spontaneously emergent, spontaneously social, and we become co-regulators of each other. It's our natural predisposition is to interact and co-regulate. But when our body gets into states of threat, and we tell people that if you're in that state, you need to socially interact, the cues will not work. People will give hugs and they'll be rigid. People will pull back. People will gaze avert. The body is, in a sense, taking the lead. Even though the mind is saying being social, the body is saying, I'm not accessible for that sociality. And we know that physiology, as people use the term sympathetic arousal or in states of fight flight, but the bottom line of it is our nervous system is in a threat state. So anxiety is another word we use for a label of when our physiology is now in this state of defense. So that is evolutionarily older than a new circuit which links face with vagal regulation of the heart. And that new circuit we're going to call, in polyvagal theory, the ventral vagal pathway, because it comes from a brainstem area that is, ventrally in the front part of the body. So now we have a sympathetic nervous system, a ventral vagal circuit that's linked with the nerves that regulate the striated muscle of the face and head, so vocalization and facial expressivity. But now the oldest evolutionary circuit is functionally a dorsal vagal circuit, comes from the back of the head. And when this circuit, which is very useful in supporting health, growth, and restoration, and it's very useful in regulating organs below the diaphragm, but when this circuit is recruited in defense, we can either totally collapse, pass out, we can defecate, or we can have gastric pains. And just think of kids who don't want to go to school because they're intimidated or bullied. It often gets reflected in their gut. Think of society and the prevalence of irritable bowel syndrome. That's basically saying that this older circuit is being recruited in defense. If it were recruited in a state of safety, it would support our homeostatic processes. So we have this evolutionary hierarchy. So you now have a rule about how the autonomic nervous system gets recruited to serve our adaptive functions. When we are safe and have cues of safety, we are spontaneously engaging, and sociality becomes a portal to help basically support our physiology, our health, growth, and restoration. When we're under a state of danger or threat, we take away, we retract reflexively through those neuroception processes. We take away that social engagement. It enables our heart rate to be more rapid and our autonomic nervous system not to be impeded by a constraining system that keeps it calm. You take away the brake, and now the system, if needed, can really be expressive. And that's our fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system being, so sympathetic being used in defense would be called fight, flight. Sympathetic being used in safety would be called exuberance and excitement, passion. And then we have this older circuit, this dorsal one, and when that's used in defense, we shut down. We end ancient vertebrate that are, in a sense, way back in the evolutionary journey of vertebrates, and mammals are the newest vertebrate. Those ancient vertebrates, their primary defense system was to immobilize, stop breathing, and appear to be dead. And that was a regulator when there wasn't enough food, wasn't enough oxygen, and they could just be dormant. But we don't have that option because we need oxygen. So that's the short bit, that those different states, which are triggered by neuroception, are ordered in an evolutionary hierarchy in which the newer circuits is as inhibit or contain or constrain the older circuits.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.